In this video, I want to take a few minutes to talk about what happens when we pass objects around our program. For example, we take this other book object defined right here on line 7, and we pass it into the getSummary function. We do that down here on line 21. Inside of this function, we get access to the object as book, and we read a few of book's properties, title, author, and page count. We proved that this worked by running the script and seeing the various summaries showing the correct information. What I want to talk about in this video is what would happen if we were to try to modify book. Would we just be modifying book, the argument, or would we also be modifying that original object? To mess around with what happens when we do modify those objects, let's just create a new file and run through a couple of quick examples. Over here in the objects directory, I'm going to create a file called objects-references. .js, and in here we're going to start by creating an object. For this example, let's imagine we're creating an expense manager application. So the thing we're trying to model with our object isn't a book or a person or a car, it's the user's account in our application. So right here we can make our first account. Let my account equal, we're going to have it equal an object, and on this object, we're going to provide 3 properties for each account in our application. The first one is just going to be a name, something that we can use to identify which account we're referring to. Name can be a string, and I'll just use my name for this one. Now, the other 2 properties are going to be related to the expense tracking side of things, and the first one is going to be called expenses. This is where we're going to track the total amount of expenses the user has racked up. We're going to set expenses equal to 0 to start, and we'll change it over time. The last property we're going to add is the income. So right here, income will also start off at 0, and it's something that once again we'll be able to change with various functions we create. Now, to kick things off, what we're going to do is create a function that allows us to add an expense. So we specify the account we want to change, and we specify the amount of the expense. Let's say we buy a coffee for $2.50. In the end of the day, I would expect the expenses property of the account we're trying to change to be increased by that amount. To figure out how this works and to explore how passing around objects affects our objects, let's create a function. Down below, and I'm going to call this one addExpense. Now, addExpense is going to be a function, and it is going to take some arguments. It's actually going to take 2. As I mentioned a few moments ago, we need to know which account in our application we're trying to add an expense to, and we have to know the amount of the expense. So the first one could be something like account or user account, and the second one could be something like total or, in my case, amount. Now, it really doesn't make sense to have a default for either of these, so I'm going to go ahead and leave off default arguments for both. Down below, we can actually fill out the addExpense function. What's the goal inside of here? The goal is to manipulate the expenses property of the object passed in. That is account.expenses. We are going to set it equal to a new value like we did in the previous videos. In this case, it is going to be the old value, account.expenses, plus the amount passed in. So here we get the current value, the current expenses, we add on the new amount, and we store that in the expenses property. Now, there's actually no need for this function to return anything. Its whole job is just going to be to change the account. Inside of here, for the moment, we're going to use console.log to print the account object, just so we can see how things are actually running in our script. And down below, we're going to use this new function. I'm going to call addExpense. I'm going to pass in the 2 arguments it expects. The first is an account. I have just one, my account, and the second is an amount. Let's go ahead and stick with the example I used before. I buy a coffee for $2.50. Now, what we're going to do to wrap up this little script is to log my account. So console.log my account. And this is going to allow us to see the differences between account and my account. Let's go ahead and save the file and run the script from the terminal. That is node objects-references.js. And when I run the script, what do I get? Well, I actually don't get 2 different objects. I am getting the exact same thing printing twice. Right here, I have an object, Andrew Mead 2.50. Down below, I have an object with the same properties, Andrew Mead 2.50. So what exactly is going on to cause both of the objects to be the same? When we pass an object into a function argument like we do here, what we get as that argument value isn't just a clone of the object with the exact same properties and values, it's actually a reference to the exact same object in memory. So somewhere on your machine, in your computer's RAM, we have this object stored. MyAccount is a pointer to this object. When we pass MyAccount into addExpense, account becomes a pointer to that object as well. And this explains why changing account not only changes account, as we probably expected, but it also changes MyAccount, which we might not have expected. This is why we get an expenses value of 2.5 for each. Changing one is just like changing the other, since they're both pointing to the same object in memory. Now let's go ahead and play with this a bit more. What I want to do is comment out this line right here, and we're going to add a new line as the first line to the addExpense function. Instead of manipulating one of account's properties, what I want to do is just assign something new to account. So account equals, using the assignment operator, something brand new. How about an empty object? Now the question is, what's going to happen here? Are we clearing account and MyAccount? Are we clearing just one? So to figure out what happens, the best thing to do is to always run the program. I'm going to save the file. I'm going to rerun the script, and what we get now are two very different things. We're getting an empty object as the first console.log, that's the one right here, and we're getting an object with our MyAccount properties as the second console.log. That's the one right here. So when we pass an object into a function, we can manipulate its properties. If we manipulate its properties, we're manipulating the properties of the object originally passed in. If we assign a new value to that argument, we break this binding completely. Now, account does not point to the same thing that MyAccount did. So I can't use the assignment operator in account to clear MyAccount or set it to something new like the number 1. This is not going to work. It's only when we manipulate the properties of the object do we see the change reflected in both. So what we really want for the addExpense function is something like this. We want to manipulate the expenses property, and there's not actually a need to log account. I just added that in there so we can see what's happening as the script runs. Now this behavior is not only for passing an object into a function. If I were to do something like the following, let other account equal MyAccount, we now have the same situation where a change to MyAccount would be reflected in other account, and a change to other account would be reflected in MyAccount. The most common situation is to see an object passed into a function, but this would also create the binding. If I changed other account, I would see that change reflected down below. For example, other account dot income equals 1000. If I were to rerun the script, the very last console.log, actually the only one, the one for MyAccount, reflects the change made to other account. So both of these are referencing the same object in memory. Now also, like what we saw before, trying to take other account and assign something new to it isn't going to change MyAccount in any way. It's only when we change a property on other account will we see the change reflected in both. Don't get bogged down with the details too much right now. All of this is going to come up more organically as we start writing more code. In the very next video, we're actually going to have a challenge video where it's going to be up to you to add 3 new functions to the expense tracker. That's why there's no challenge for this video. The next one is a challenge video. I'm really excited to get to that one, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. I'll see you over there.